Glam metal sucked in the 80s, and it sucks now, Andrew.
This was the 80s, and everyone knew that racism no longer existed in America.
Gus told me that back in the 80s, he was part of a top-secret unit that got their training in the Army.
Back to the 80s!
I got through the 80s dork-free.
But it's back to the 80s, right?
Yes. Perfect.
In the 80s, I was trained at Fort Bragg under a secret initiative, codenamed Project Jedi.
Back in the 80s, no didn't mean no. Warren got your mother f***ed up on contaminated nuclear marijuana.
The 80s will have a major stroke.
Now, we had some hard times in the 80s, even though we were the official hotel of Candid Pictures. But we're coming back strong in the 90s. And
My father owned a bar in the 80s.
It's officially time to go back to the 80s!
It was the 80s, and his business was doing really good, so, you know, why save all that money when you could shovel it up your nose?
Like so many teenagers of the 80s, she aborted you in the school bath.
You didn't look like a dork in the 80s.
Who's your escort?
Escort? Please, this is the 80s.
Yeah, you know, in the 80s, that's when it's gonna happen. For real.
Really?
Yes, really, like in the 80s.
Wow.